We finally know Carolina's first opponent for the Maui Invitational, and hopefully they can pass that test with flying colors. But game two, it's going to be a doozy.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to thank you for making us your first listen or watch, and a special shout out to all you everydayers and all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord family. So glad that you're all here. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket free from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Coming up on the show today, going to be a super fun conversation. We've got our first round matchups for Maui. It's almost time for Jasper Johnson's commitment to be announced, and we've got an interesting NIL conversation around AJ DeBanza. But before we get to all of that, it's Tuesday, and that means it's time for Trivia Tuesday. Let's dive in. We just learned that Omarion Hampton has been named an AP preseason first-team All-American. Congrats, go run wild this year. But it brings up an interesting question. 7 different Tar Heels have been named first-team All-Americans in the 2000s, a total of 9 different times, meaning somebody's been named that more than once. So my question for you, who are those 7 Tar Heels? And by the way, bonus, if you can name who it is that has been named the first team All-American more than one time. So answer coming up at the end of the show. Don't miss out. All right. Jon Rothstein reported on Monday that the Maui Invitational, we don't have the bracket yet, but we do, from sources to him, have at least the first round matchups, and it's probably an indication of how the bracket will lay out. Here you go. Here are those matchups in the order that he gave them to us, which I think, again, is going to show the different sides of the bracket. Number 1, UConn versus Memphis, Michigan State versus Colorado, Auburn versus Iowa State, and North Carolina taking on the Dayton Flyers. Hopefully somebody out there caught my complete dad joke in the cold open with passing that game with flying colors. Also, for those of you watching, you can see I'm wearing a lei here. I just got this lei in Hawaii a couple weeks ago when we checked in to our condo in Maui. So I thought I'd wear it for a little good luck today as we talk Maui. Yes, I'm going to have to wear this in November as well. For those of you wondering, hey, Isaac, you said the 8 teams of Maui Invitational, but I didn't hear Chaminad's name. Well, that's because Chaminade doesn't play in the event every year anymore. They are an every other year team. They played in it last year, so that's why you get them, or not them. This is a great field. It's not as quite as loaded down as last year's was, but it's very, very, very good. That said, Carolina probably catches a little bit of a break getting Dayton. I would say probably them, or maybe Colorado, who lost a bunch of talent last year, is the quote-unquote worst team in this field. I say that because it's a relative term for worst, because all of these are at worst solid college basketball teams. Thankfully, Carolina catches Dayton a year after Day'Ron Holmes leaves. And so, man, glad to not have to mess with him when we face off in Maui. So Dayton shouldn't be as good. But here's the thing. It's just hard to know in the transfer portal era. We really won't know until they get up and running. Speaking of which, like, you remember last time Dayton was at Maui? That was Obi Toppin's final year, and they went off. Great championship game. They played Kansas in the championship. Unfortunately, that was the 2019-20 season. Dayton was projecting to probably be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, but it got COVIDed, and so they've just never, Dayton doesn't get those kind of years so regularly. So anyway, that's who Carolina will play in round 1. Now, here is the next thing. Assuming that this is how the bracket lays out, you get UConn versus Memphis and Michigan State, Colorado on one side, and then Auburn versus Iowa State, UNC versus Dayton on the other side. Auburn, Iowa State is the game of round 1. I mean, that is a fantastic basketball game. Auburn always going to have that high-level offense under Bruce Pearl. Iowa State's defense is rolling, but they're solid beyond that as well. I think Iowa State's going to be phenomenal this year. So I'm very excited about that game. But regardless of what Carolina does against Dayton, win or lose, regardless of what Auburn or Iowa State does, win or lose, assuming that is the next game, I don't care if Carolina's playing Auburn or Iowa State. That is a knockdown, drag-out fight. And quite frankly, Carolina owes both of those teams some revenge. Auburn from the Sweet 16 game in 2019, where Carolina was under the weather. Nasir Little was really coming into his own. Auburn beat us. And then Iowa State from 2 years ago in PK 85, where Caleb Grill went nuts and ruined my Thanksgiving. And then Carolina lost their next game a couple days later to Alabama. That was that 4 overtime game. So anyway, either way, Carolina owes some work to one of these teams. So that's going to be an insane game, which also brings up, oh, by the way, Carolina's non-conference schedule is absolutely loaded. No matter whether you get Auburn or Iowa State, you start looking at this and it's like, how many preseason top 10 teams are the Tar Heels playing this season? If I used Gary Parrish from CBS, his top 25-1, Carolina, he's got Kansas number 1. Carolina plays at Kansas. He's got Alabama number 2. The Tar Heels host them in the ACC SEC Challenge. He's got UConn 5th. Carolina could play them in Maui, just depending on how the bracket goes. Carolina will, if the bracket is what we think it is, either play Iowa State, who is 6th, or Auburn, who is 10th. And then outside of non-con, you get Duke twice, who's number 9 at GP's top 25-1. And then Carolina is 4th in those rankings. So there's only 9 opponents Carolina could play in the top 10. And it's a potential, if they played UConn at Maui, that they could play Kansas, Bama, UConn, Iowa State, or Auburn, and Duke twice. That's 6 games against the top 10 currently in Gary Parrish's thing. That, my friends, is a loaded schedule that will have this team battle tested and ready. Might have a couple losses on that resume, but you just need to know that's what we're looking at. And, let's compare that with another high major school. Indiana thinks they're going to be real good at basketball this year. They get in Umar Ballo. They get in several other transfers. Mackenzie Mbako's back. And so I'm like, oh, Indiana's going to be really good. I bet they've got a loaded non-con. Well, it came out just a little bit ago. Let me read it to you. Versus SIU Evansville, versus Eastern Illinois, versus South Carolina, versus UNC Greensboro, Battle for Atlantis, that's got Arizona, Davidson, Gonzaga, Louisville, Oklahoma, Providence, West Virginia, then versus Sam Houston, and then versus Miami of Ohio, then versus UT Chattanooga, and then versus Winthrop. If you're keeping score at home, Indiana's non-conference includes 8 home games, 7 of which are bye games. The other is South Carolina at home, who's fine as an SEC opponent, but outside of the Battle for Atlantis, that's literally the only power conference school they're playing. And who knows what the bracket's going to be at Battle for Atlantis. That hasn't quite come out yet. We're expecting it around this week, maybe next. But, Davidson, Providence, West, none of those. Arizona's going to be great. Gonzaga's going to be great. Nobody else in that field projects to be great. So just, I know I'm out here making Indiana catch strays, and I apologize for that. But just playing that comparison game, look at Carolina's schedule and look at Indiana's schedule. I would rather have ours and come out of non-conference 8-3. Or no, we played 12 games. So like 9-3 or something like that. Even 8-4, but battle tested and ready to go. And remember, the selection committee looks at that stuff, man, and they take it into account. So I love how hard this schedule is, but it's going to be a doozy. So just get ready for that. Also, let's just say about Maui. Remember, it was about a year ago that there were all those fires that happened actually in Lahaina. Now, interestingly enough, as I was talking about with my family and I were just there a couple weeks ago, right at the beginning of August, celebrating our 15th anniversary. And one of the really neat things is there's the old Lahaina luau, which is like the luau to go to in Maui. It survived the fire, and they just recently reopened, and they're giving a bunch of their proceeds to various community endeavors as they're working to get back. So we got to go and experience that luau and just help in some small way. Look, like you know what I'm saying? Like we didn't do anything, but a portion of the tickets we paid go to help. And that's just really cool. So happy for the community of Lahaina starting to rebuild. I mean, it's tough, man. We went over to the Civic Center where Maui Invitational is. It's funny. It's just this nondescript building, like by a fire station and a police station. I'm sure some of you have been there and seen it, but for those who haven't, there you go. But there's a section of like local residences right by the Civic Center that you just can't get to. It asks you to stay out. It says closed to the public, basically, so that those people aren't disturbed and disrupted. And so there's still a lot going on in that community, still very, very real and fresh to deal with. And so I'm so glad. Remember last year they played, I think it was actually in Honolulu, the Maui Invitational. So I love that the event is coming back to the Lahaina Civic Center this year. Just is going to be so meaningful for that community. And it was really neat to be there and see that coming back together. So looking forward to the Tar Heels doing this. And we know how it goes. There's so many times and then won the national championship. So that's going to be tough task because there's some great teams, but look, it would be awesome. All right. Now, Jasper Johnson is one of Carolina's prime targets in the class of 2025. And it sounds like he is nearing a decision. And there's some interesting stuff surrounding that commitment. We'll get to it in just a second. Right after I tell you about Ibata. Look, the summer's almost over, but lots of folks are still taking a dream end of summer vacation, but they're kind of dreading the cost because it's so much. Well, here's the good news. With Ibata, you get cash back on all your purchases, so you can spend more time making memories this summer and less time dreaming about them. Ibata is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibata user earns $256 a year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that dream like meal, that fancy dinner you've been craving, maybe that flight you've been eyeing. Go ahead and get those tickets. It's time you join the over 50 million users who use Ibata to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying it out by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibata app, and start earning cash back. And remember, use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. Jasper Johnson, one of Carolina's main recruiting targets in the class of 2025, a guard, is set to commit sometime before the end of August, next week. This reporting came out on Monday from Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio, KSR. It's like a fan-started radio program that's kind of like just grown up over the years and is basically like the voice of Big Blue Nation as a fan. And so KSR does a really great job for Kentucky. Here's the thing with Jasper Johnson, man. We talked about this yesterday with Nick Homenia. I would just love for Carolina to get locked in their first commit in the class of 2025. You know, there's like so many offers out there in this class. And, you know, at some point, somebody just has to break the ice to get this thing rolling, right? We don't know in this day and age exactly how many high school commits Coach Davis and the staff want to take in the class of 2025, because there's this balance you need today of high school recruits with transfer portal guys, with guys that you've developed from within. But man, Jasper could be that first guy to commit, and I would absolutely be appreciative of that happening. However, here's what I'll say about Jasper Johnson. He does not feel to me like a must-have. He feels like somebody that there are other kind of similar recruits that Carolina could get that would do a lot of the same stuff that he does. I would love to have him, but I think there are and will be others either in the high school ranks or in the portal kind of at his same level. He's a great player and he's a bucket, But for example, I don't see him in the same light as like Ian Jackson, at least currently, right? He's got another year of growth. In fact, we were talking about this on Discord on Monday night, and Riley Davis, our guy, he said this, quote, "This is going to sound like coping if we don't get him. Jasper is good, but not can't miss. He doesn't have a right hand and has a ways to go if he wants to actually be a combo guard instead of a straight up two guard, meaning got to develop more point guard skills." That being said, he's a bucket, and I still really want him in Chapel Hill. This recruitment, and this is key for me, this recruitment feels just as important for the vibes as it does getting a high upside guard. And what Riley means by that is this isn't just about landing a high upside guard. This is about beating Alabama. This is about beating Kentucky and getting this commitment and getting the class of 2025 rolling. And Jasper Johnson would be a great start to that class. Now, a reminder, Jasper is from Lexington, Kentucky, home of Rupp Arena, home of the Wildcats. He has most recently played at Link Academy, where James Brown, where Elliot Cadeau both played, but now he's playing his senior year with Overtime Elite down in Atlanta. The final schools, I just mentioned a couple of them: Carolina, Kentucky, Alabama, also Arkansas and Louisville, but it really sounds like Arkansas and Louisville are on the outside looking in. There's been all sorts of reporting and rumors the last week or two about, it's down to Kentucky and Bama. It's Carolina and Bama. Bama has a lead. Kentucky has a lead. Oh, there's noise for Carolina. So it's one of those that really feels like it could be any of those three, and we might not have a really good vibe on it until he says, "I'm taking my talents to unzip, put the hat on," and then right? I'm sure we'll get crystal balls put in and all that, but it feels like Jasper's kind of keeping this thing close to the vest. Now, here's something I love about Jasper Johnson and why I really would like to have him, even just talent aside, is that with him, with so many recruits in this day and age, it feels like it all comes down to NIL and dollars. And, you don't have to do the work with the family. You just got to say, "Hey, look, buddy, we got $2 million for you, you in, you out." And it's so transactional instead of relational. And I think that takes away the recruiting prowess of somebody like a Hubert Davis, who we all know how good of a recruiter and a relationship builder he is, not only with these young men, but with their families as well. And with Jasper, it sounds like from his own mouth that it's not going to come down to just NIL or the highest bidder. It's not a bidding war, but rather, where do I best fit? Here's what he told KSR about NIL. Quote, "I know it's something that has to be done nowadays, and it's something you've got to look into, but it's not really that important to me. Wow. I'm keeping the main goal, and the main focus. I let everyone around me and my parents deal with that. I've just got to focus on what's important, and everything else will take care of itself." Translation to me is, I got to find where I best fit. And if I go and ball out, the NIL is going to be there and the money is going to take care of itself. I want to be part of, where it makes sense for me to be of, where I can play, where I can have the ball in my hands, where I can learn those combo guard skills like that Riley was talking about. And so, that's just really encouraging to me in this era of where's the dollars. Jasper's not quite as worried about that, at least, from what he says. We'll see when the action, when the rubber hits the road with that. Here's what I'll also say. Riley talked about coping. I will say this at the end. This sounds weird to come out of my mouth. If he's not going to come to Carolina, I would rather him go to Kentucky than Alabama. I am so sick and tired of losing to Alabama on and off the court. I know that sounds weird to say, but you're all with me, right? Gotta stop. So anyway, Jasper Johnson, we expect his commitment sometime next week. We'll wait to hear the official date and time and what it's all going to come down to. And then we wait and see. Now, speaking of all of this, AJ DeBansa his father, Ace DeBansa, recently had some very interesting things to say about NIL and how he and AJ and their family will be interacting with it and shoe deals. Talk more about that and the Tuesday trivia answer all coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, man. They're one of our great sponsors here on the Locked On Network. It's America's #1 sportsbook. And usually this summer, I've been filling you in on a boost or a bonus that they're giving you every day, FanDuel. Well, I've got something a little bit different for you now, because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Looking at some FanDuel odds, how about ACC football championship game winner? Tar Heels a little bit far down the list, but we're going to get there. FSU leads the way at plus 290, Clemson plus 360, Miami plus 400, NC State, boy, we got to beat them, plus 600, Virginia Tech and Louisville plus 1,000, SMU plus 1,200, and then the Tar Heels plus 3,600, way off. So if you believe in Carolina and what they're going to do this year and that they might win that ACC championship, those are some great odds for you to get in on. And if you want to do so, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. AJ Debantza's father, Ace Debantza, recently had an interview with Adam Zagoria of Zags Blog, who does a great job covering college basketball. If you're unaware, AJ Debantza is the #1 player in all of high school, regardless of class, but he is in 2025, so he'll be a senior this year. We talked about him quite a bit last week. He is down to a Final 7 that includes Carolina, along with Auburn, Alabama, there we go again, Baylor, BYU, who some think is the leader in this thing, Kansas and Kansas State. Now, in this article, AJ's dad, Ace, was talking about basically all 7 schools and you know what they saw in them. It's kind of funny, honestly. For example, he was talking about Kansas State, where Jerome Tang is the head coach, and he said, yeah, I kind of like them because of Jerome Tang's name, because I'm a Wu-Tang Clan fan. It's like, okay, buddy. And it's just kind of off the wall, whatever. Anyway, that article, what piqued my interest wasn't necessarily the conversation about the 7 different schools, although it seems to me like Carolina has a legit shot at this thing, you guys. I don't want to get hopes up, but man, it's out there. What was interesting to me was some conversation late in the article about NIL, and then some conversation right after that about shoe deals and how they would be interacting with them. And I think why I want to bring these up is because Carolina's recruiting AJ, but also because I think both of these conversations are representative of where high school recruiting is going to be at in this day and age. NIL, here's what Ace had to say. Let me just give you an example. Say AJ's favorite school is Kentucky. By the way, Kentucky's not in the Final 7. He's just using them as an example. By the way, you notice that? No Kansas, no Kentucky, no Duke in this Final 7. Interesting. Anyway, say AJ's favorite school is Kentucky for the sake of this argument. And Arkansas comes to us and says, we have $10 million for you guys in NIL. Kentucky comes to us, on the other hand, and says, we only have $8 million for you. Guess where we're going? We're going to Kentucky. So just to tell you, yes, NIL is important, but it's not the end of it. So he's saying AJ prefers Kentucky over Arkansas. Arkansas comes in with an offer that's $2 million greater than Kentucky. AJ's still going to choose Kentucky because he likes it better. Now, here's the thing. If we're talking about a high school recruit that's going to make $8 million, like these are hypothetical numbers, but leaving that $2 million on the table feels very different than, say, what if in the example he had said, Kentucky offered us $500,000, but Arkansas came in and offered $2.5 million. That's still a difference of $2 million, but it feels very different. Would he, in that scenario, still choose Kentucky, or would he go to Arkansas? Right? Does that make sense? So, yeah, $2 million is a lot of money, but the difference between 8 and 10 million, and the difference between 500,000 and 2.5 million is starkly different. So I'm curious, where does that actually sit, right? Like, what are we talking about? If everybody's offering 4 million, we're going to just choose the best place. But if it's lower, you know what I mean? So it's just really interesting to see. He's saying, yes, NIL isn't everything, but it is a thing. Notice those numbers he's throwing around. The Debantza family is expecting a massive bag to be dropped, and understandably so, because this kid is insanely talented. So I'm curious to see, as that recruitment plays out, which it sounds like he's planning to commit some point in February. I'm guessing after his season is over. And man, I'm just really curious with that. The other thing with shoe deals and the timing of it in this new era. Zagorius said in his article, currently, AJ has a high school NIL deal signed with Nike. He plays on the EYBL circuit, Nike's AAU circuit. All of Dibance's finalists are Nike or Jordan sponsored programs, besides Kansas, which is, you might or might not know, is an Adidas school. Ace, AJ's dad, said that the branding of programs will not affect the decision at all. And here's a quote from Ace. The Nike deal ends in June, so by the time we go to college, he's going to be a free agent, end quote. So when he says the branding of programs will not affect the decision at all, it's not that necessarily he's still going to be signed with Nike. It's that the Nike deal is ending when he finishes his high school career, and he could sign a deal with anyone when he starts his college career. Will he sign, if he goes to Kansas, would he sign an Adidas deal, or is he going to re-up with Nike one way or the other? I don't know. But what I do know is this is a wildly shrewd move to sign an NIL deal that only goes through the end of college or of high school, excuse me. Not that it's one that it's like, hey, Nike's going to lock us in from now until he goes to the NBA or whatever it is, right? That's some very good representation from whoever brokered this deal on behalf of the Dibances, right? Well done. Now, are we going to continue to see that happening? Where is the money going to be with all that? And, it's a lot at play, but I just thought both of these things, the conversation about the NIL dollars and the conversation about the shoe deal, were prime examples, quintessential examples of the times we're living in. All right, Tuesday trivia answer coming at you. 7 different Tar Heels have been first-team All-Americans in the 2000s, a total of 9 times. Who are they? And a bonus, who got it more than one time? We're going to find out one of them right away. Somebody that, by the way, just got into the NFL Hall of Fame. And that's Julius Peppers, who was a first-team All-American in both 2000 and 2001. Then it was over a decade before the next Tar Heel first-team All-American, Jonathan Cooper, in 2012. Then tight end Eric Ebron the next year, 2013. Then Landon Turner in 2015. And then our second double first-team All-American, Ryan Switzer in 2013 and 2015. Chaz Surratt in 2020 as a linebacker, not as a quarterback. And then most recently, Omarion Hampton last year named a first-team All-American. And as we said, is an AP preseason first-team All-American this year. Who got them right? Would love to hear from you. That's it for today's episode of Locked on Tar Heels. If you haven't subscribed to the show, go ahead and do that on video and audio. If you're not one of the Locked on Tar Heels Discord members, then we would love to have you. Come for the Tar Heels, stay for the great community that's in there. It's free to join. The links for that are in the show notes. Just click on it and sign on up. Come on in. The water's fine, especially as we get towards football season here. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk to you again tomorrow, but until then, peace.